Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make a sauteed chicken salad with some French veggies, some homemade croutons using some leftover sourdough bread that we have, and some sourdough discard muffins. So first we are going to start up, I'm going to have some eggs go in our salad, but I'm going to be making some Easter bread and I want a couple eggs dyed up. So we're going to hard boil a couple eggs so that my kids can just dye a couple tonight so I can make some Easter bread tomorrow. The pretty like Italian Easter bread with the dyed egg braided into it. So we're going to get those going so they can cook up because we're going to put 2 in our salad and then we'll have some for our bread. And while we're doing that, let's get our chicken. Let's start our chicken to marinate and then we will do our croutons in there. So I have 2 chicken breasts here. We're going to kind of cut them in half in the middle. And because I'm going to slice them up into little slices, but I don't want them to be super thick because again, I like to cook my chicken on high heat. And then if they're thinner, they'll cook through faster. That way they will get nice and crispy on the outside, but will still stay moist on the inside. Okay, so we're just going to do kind of long little strips of chicken that we'll saute up, but we want to get them in a quick marinade real quick. And go through here. It's such a nice day outside that I was like, I want something different. Where weather's changing. So, of course, you get to wanting more fresh fruit or foods and stuff like that. So I was like, the salad feels good today. And we had a little bit of sourdough bread left. We're going to be baking up some new loaves tonight. So I was like, oh, perfect. We can make some croutons with it because homemade croutons are just so delicious, especially with sourdough. I feel like sourdough makes the best croutons because they're already kind of a chewier bread. So we'll get those baking up. They don't take long to bake, which is nice. There we go. Almost have our chicken saute or sliced up. Getting ready for that to saute. I'm going to take these and put them in the sink because we don't need them. I'm going to give my hands a quick wash. Okay. And let's get our seasonings over here for our chicken. We're going to use a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. This is going to allow the chicken to stay moist. The acidity in it helps break down the fat in the chicken and keeps it nice and tender. So about a tablespoon or so of the Worcestershire sauce. Then we're going to give about a half a teaspoon of Mrs. Dash's table blend. Probably just going to use up the rest of this. And then about a teaspoon of garlic salt. So that's a good couple of shakes. And let me get a spoon to mix this up, or a fork. So we're going to let that sit and kind of soak in the marinade for a little bit before we saute it up. That way it kind of has a time it's like a quick marinade, get the nice flavors on it. There. Just tossing it around. You don't want to have it a super wet marinade because we want to cook it on high heat and we want it to kind of crisp up a little. So we can leave that, that right in there. Oh, got an eyelash in my eye. I was hanging up some of my Teddy's artwork this morning and I put it next to this glittery thing and I got so covered in gold glitter this morning and I've been trying to get it off of me so it doesn't get in my eye. So here we've got a couple scraps of sourdough bread left. I'm going to get a baking sheet. And what we're going to do is we're going to just cut these up into, little cubes, little squares, just like like croutons. So I have there's leftover pepperoni and mozzarella sourdough, which I think will be actually really delicious in a crouton. And then I have some traditional, just good old plain Jane sourdough. And cut these in half. And I'm just aiming for about a nice, like a dice sized. You don't want anything too big because you want to be able to pick it up on your fork and eat it. There. I find if you do like specialty like savory sourdoughs, they do make the best croutons because you get so much of that flavor in the crouton versus just a plain one where you're adding like a superficial flavoring on the top. And the like crusty edge pieces, like the heels of the bread, those also are like great for croutons. So get these chopped up. So like I try not to let things go to waste. And so this is nice when you have it towards the very end and you have a couple of scraps. This is just a great way to reuse them. You could also use them to make stuffing or bread pudding. But the savory ones lend themselves the best to croutons. Okay, just a few more. And then we're going to toss these with some olive oil and some Italian seasoning, garlic, salt, and onion powder and pepper, because we do want to season them up, and the olive oil will allow them to get a nice crunch on them. I do have my oven preheated to 375 degrees. That way, and we're going to cook them for about 10 minutes or so. Okay. Put this right over here. And I'm putting all of mine in a big pile. And then we're going to drizzle with about 1/4 cup of olive oil. Maybe a little less. And we're going to shake it with some black pepper. I'm going to do probably around 1/4 of a teaspoon. A little bit of onion powder, about 1/2 teaspoon. And some Italian herbs, about 1/2 teaspoon of this. And then let me grab my garlic salt. And we're going to do just about 1/2 teaspoon, not much. And then we're just going to really coat these. So you're just going to just like squeeze them together and kind of toss them because you want to get them all coated with the olive oil and the seasoning so that they all crisp up nicely. Here we go. Good. And you can see they look a little like kind of a little moist from the olive oil. But now once you've got them all squeezed up, you want to spread them out as much as possible so that they're not like clumping onto each other. That way we can toast them up in the oven and they'll get nice and crispy. I'm going to give my hands a quick wash. And then we'll pop these in.
Do you have a question? What bread do you use for your croutons?
So this is just our leftover sourdough scraps. So I had a little bit of my plain sourdough loaf, and then I had the 2 ends of my pepperoni and mozzarella sourdough. So I just try to use whatever leftover sourdough I have because I find it makes just delicious croutons, and it's a good way to use it so it's not going to waste. I'm going to set my timer for 10 minutes so I don't forget about it. And let's go and start making the batter for our donuts. Okay.
You have a question? Have you ever made a focaccia bread?
We made focaccia last night for our dinner. We actually have the video uploaded on there. I make it probably once or twice, once a week at least. I have a couple of different variations for my focaccia. Sometimes I do a straight up sourdough one. Sometimes I do like a half and half sourdough and yeast. And then I have one that's mainly sourdough with a pinch of yeast in it for it to help. It just depends how much time I have. But I do make focaccia quite a bit because it is a delicious bread that I can get done in like the same day versus my sourdough is about 2 days before I can really bake it up. Okay, let's make the base for our sourdough donuts. I have my donut maker over here warming up. We are going to use a cup of sourdough discard. which is good so I can feed this up and start making another loaf of bread. Because like I said, we're going to be baking up some tonight. We're baking up our just traditional loaf and then a chocolate or a sourdough loaf with chocolate chunks and cherry. But then I want to start another loaf so I have one to bake up in a day or so. So we've got a cup of sourdough discard. Let's put this over here. Okay. And now we are going to add in a cup of milk. I'm using whole milk. Let me get my spoon so we can stir it up, a little spatula here. And now this is a discard recipe, so we're not actually using the sourdough to rise these donuts. This is just a great way to get rid of some of your starter when you need to feed it for a new loaf. Okay, so I'm mixing that in there. Now I have 1/4 cup of butter, which is a 1/2 stick, melted. We're going to add that in here. Just scoop it all out. I like to do all of my wet ingredients first. That way, it's much easier to mix them in, and then we'll do our dry. Okay, we're going to crack in 1 egg. I'm going to poke my yolk, and we're going to mix it in. Just you want to make sure your egg gets mixed in fairly well, because once we add the flour in, you want to minimize your mixing, because the more you mix, especially with a butter type batter, it will yield a stiffer baked product. So do your mixing before you add your flour. All right, with oil, you don't have quite as much of an issue, but when you use butter in your baked goods, you've got to minimize your mixing. Okay, now we're going to add in 2 teaspoons of vanilla.
Do you have a question? Do you know what you're making yet for dinner?
I am going to be using chicken. I haven't decided how exactly I'm going to cook that chicken yet, but I do have a lot of avocados that need to be used up, so I might be doing something Mexican along the line. But that could change. I could change any minute. I could also I was thinking about doing, pulled pork, because my daughter has been asking to go to Chipotle nonstop. And I was like, well, I'll make it at home and hopefully that gets your craving. Okay, we got our 2 teaspoons of vanilla mixed in here. Now we are going to add in a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Let me grab my salt container.
There's a question. Can you use a whisk if you want?
You can definitely use a whisk. Any way you want to mix it, you can. Once you get to the flour, you just don't want to over mix it. So we got a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And now we're going to add in a tablespoon of baking powder. So this is what's going to puff up your muffins, or not your muffins, your donuts. There we go. Need to order some more baking powder. So 1 whole tablespoon, and we're going to give this a nice stir. Make sure you have all of your baking soda, or baking powder, not baking soda, mixed in, because this is what you want to make sure it's really dispersed throughout your liquid. I don't like to take the extra time to sift my flour and baking powder and stuff, so I just make sure give it a good mix before I add my flour. And you can see it actually causes the baking powder reacts with the discard, which causes it to actually rise up and get more fluffy, which will lead to a delicious kind of fluffy cake donut.
You have a question. With you as a mom making all the food you make, why would your daughter want to eat out?
Because the children don't know what they have until they don't have it. They always want to eat out, and I think it's just kids. They just constantly want something they can't have. I feel like she texts me every day, can we go to Target? Can we go to this place? Can we go? And I'm like, money does not grow on trees. We're going to use 3/4 the cup of sugar. She just is always asking for stuff. I think she's in that age. She's that teenager,
You have a question? Can you go over what discard is, please?
Discard is when you are making sourdough bread, you need a sourdough starter. And it's a sourdough starter is just equal parts flour and water that have been fermenting on your counter, and you feed it to keep it alive. Feeding it is giving it more flour and water, but you have to throw away some of it. Otherwise, you're just going to have buckets and buckets of starter that you can't do. So discard is your starter that you're throwing away that isn't necessarily active, meaning it's not bubbly enough to make bread. And then you feed it to make it active for bread. So we're using some discard, and then I'm going to feed my starters later so that I can make bread with it, because you need active starter for bread. Okay, we've got our sugar mixed in here. Now we are going to add in 2 cups of flour. So we've got 1 and 2, and I'm just using all-purpose flour. I'm just turn down my eggs a little. We've got a nice big rolling boil on them, but they don't need to have such a high boil. There we go. So we're done with our flour. Now we're going to mix this in. Again, you don't want to over mix your batter because you want it to be kind of chunky. That's going to give you the best fluffy, light donut. If you overmix it, it's going to be a lot firmer. There we go. And so these, what we're doing is just a really kind of a plain like vanilla cake donut. And then we're going to jazz up our glazes. We're going to do a vanilla glaze and then an almond glaze. And then we're going to do some fun colors because my kids always love it when we do holiday themed stuff. Okay, so here is our batter. You can see it's nice and chunky. That's what you want. That is going to lead for a really fluffy donut. Let me get a spoon to scoop it out, and let me get my spray. Here it is. I always like to spray it. That way the donuts slide out of my maker really easy. If you don't have a donut maker, you can get a donut baking sheet. And these would bake in the oven at 350 for about 15 or so minutes. But I love my my little donut maker. I've had it for 15 plus years. We're gonna give it a nice spray. It's been preheating. And we're gonna start spooning in our batter. And each batch of donuts need about 2 to 3 minutes to cook up. You don't want to go overfill them, or they'll kind of ooze out like a waffle maker. So I find like 1 big kind of tablespoon, like scoop in there, works perfect for this. And I will say mini donuts, my kids love it. These this will probably make about 20, 24, so maybe up to 2 dozen. Depends, but they go fast.
You have a question? Where did you get the donut maker from?
I got it from, I believe, Walmart back in the day. So it was like, I got this when I was in college. And I was in college from 2006 to 2009. I did it in 3 years. Had to be a show off, of course. And I think I got it in like 2007 or 2008. So it is old, but it has made it. It's a Sunbeam, and it has been with us forever. And it gets used, I think, once or twice a month. When I used to teach, we used to make donuts in my class all the time. And it was like the favorite afternoon snack. We're going to put some olive oil in, maybe about a tablespoon or 2 into our big pan here. And we're going to heat it up, and we're going to saute up our chicken. Here are croutons. So let's go check on our croutons and see how they are baking. Let's get our oven mitt here. And then I'm going to pull them out. Perfect. They've got a nice little crunch on them. And we're going to let them cool off. They will get crunchier as they cool. So you kind of crisp them up. It's like if you've ever made a biscotti before, the second bake is what crisps them, the biscotti, and makes it hard. Same with like the bruschetta bread. So we're going to let those sit there and cool for our salad, our croutons, our sourdough croutons. Now we've got our chicken. Once this is nice and hot, we're going to put our seasoned chicken in that we marinated with Worcestershire, garlic, salt, Mrs. Dash's table blend.
I have a question. Have you ever made pumpernickel croutons?
You know what? I have not. I have not made well, I've made a mild form of pumpernickel bread, but I haven't done that in a long time. I keep telling my husband that I need to make some rye sourdough starters, which I could use for pumpernickel, make some of those more seasoned breads. But I just haven't gotten to it. I just need to do it. My next goal is right now, I'm planning to make a chocolate starter so that I can make chocolate sourdough. It's just, it makes it so you have a much richer sourdough versus using a plain sourdough starter. So for our salad, we are going to cut up some lettuce here. I've just got some romaine lettuce. And I like to buy them in the full little heads because they actually last much longer than if you buy them already cut up. As soon as you cut into like lettuce, it goes bad within a couple of days. The natural sugar comes out. Put there. Because we're going to have our first batch of donuts done before we chop up some of our vegetables. Let's get our glazes made because I like to glaze my donuts when they're hot. That way they will, the glaze oozes down over it. So let's clear up some of this mess. We're going to do 2 types of glazes. We're going to do a vanilla glaze and then an almond glaze using some almond extract. There we go. And then we're going to use half and half. So it's kind of like a milk, like a cream glaze. So I've got some fun colors here because you got to do the fun Easter colors. My kids keep counting down, telling me how many days till Easter, when I really feel like they're asking how many days until they get their Easter basket. So we're putting a teaspoon of vanilla in each one, and then we're going to put a teaspoon of almond extract in each bowl. And this is just because I'm going to do 4 different colors. Okay. And then we are going to add in some powdered sugar. And our donuts have like a very mild vanilla flavor. Most of their flavor is going to come in from the glaze. So I like to have a nice strong glaze. You could also do lemon glaze, orange glaze. It's essentially using just fresh orange juice or fresh lemon juice and powdered sugar.
You have a question. What are you making for Easter dinner?
We are going to do lamb and rabbit. I haven't figured out everything that we're going to have with it, but I know lamb and rabbit. Let's see. We've got our oil here nice and warm, so let's put in our chicken. I'm going to pull it off there. We want it to start sauteing nice and hot. You see it sizzling? Perfect. And then I'm going to grab my tongs and we're going to toss it. There we go. Okay. We're going to let that saute for a minute before we give it a turn. Let me get a fork to stir up my glazes. Now with the glazes, we're going to add a little bit of half and half. And then we're going to, let's see how we're going on our first set here. Oh, perfect. Nice, firm. Golden brown is what we want. So I'm going to put out a baking rack. And this way, when we glaze them, the glaze can drip down through, so it coats them more evenly. I will say, people always are like, isn't that hot? I feel like my fingers don't feel heat. They're never getting that hot. If I go quickly, it doesn't bother me. Slide this out. We're going to get our next batch in so they can get going. But you see how they have this lovely kind of blonde color? I love the donut maker because it keeps the donuts moist. It's almost like a steam cook in them versus like when you bake them, sometimes they can dry out really fast. Let's get all of this cooking. Okay. Let me get my finger washed here. We're going to give a quick toss on our chicken. There we go. You see when we start it nice and hot, we get this nice brown crust on the chicken, which is the tastiest. So that's why you want to start with a nice hot pan. Let's get our glazes here mixed up so we can start dipping them. We're going to use a little bit of half and half. You could use cream or milk. We're going to start with maybe like a tablespoon in each one, and then we'll add a little bit more. We just want them to get to a nice runny texture. And remember, we put vanilla in one and almond in the other. An almond extract has like an amaretto flavor, if you're not familiar with it. So it's not like you're eating like a fresh nut. It's more like those sweet kind of nut alcohol, I will say. But it's delicious. Kind of like what you would get in an almond pastry or a Dutch letter.
Yeah, 2 questions. Is rabbit gamey?
It is a bit more gamey, but it's I haven't had it in a while. My kids really wanted it this year. It is a more gamey of a meat, but it's still delicious as long as you season it well.
And then the second question, is the recipe for the donuts available anywhere?
We will upload our video on the link on our page, but so you could always get it there. And I might have this donut one posted, but I'm not 100% sure. But we do try to make recipe cards. Okay, and now, but again, we do upload these videos so that you'd be able to watch them and then make it yourself too, just by following along. Okay, we're gonna add a bit more milk in here because it's a bit thicker and we want it to be nice and thin. So with the glaze, you want it to be drippable because you want to be able to dip it into each one of our donuts in there, and then it will ooze down below.
You have a question? Does your husband or kids ever help you cook?
They do. I will say Chef Teddy makes an appearance quite often. Whenever he sees me cooking, he runs in here, gets his little kitchen tower, and then he tries to help me. They'll be my sous chef. They like to prep here. Okay, we're almost done with our chicken here. Give it a few more turns. And then our eggs have been cooking for a while. So what I'm going to do is drain them. And then I have some ice. Got a bowl of ice here. And we're going to flash them with some ice. This is going to help them cool down really quick. Okay. My ice all stuck. There we go. And this helps cooling it down with the ice helps the eggs, help you peel them. Okay. We got our chicken here. We're going to set it to the side. Okay, now let's do our fun little colors for our donuts. So we're going to do a little bit of blue, pink, yellow, and green. Let's see if these are ready. Maybe a minute or two more. I guess I overfilled 2 of them, but we want them to get a nice richer color. Okay. So I want nice pale colors for my glazes. So here we've got a nice pale green. Here's our yellow. Nice little pastel colors. And again, we put almond extract and vanilla extract in these.
You have a question? Any sprinkles going on the donut?
No, I thought about it, but I am not much of a sprinkle person. It kind of messes with the texture for me. My kids love it, and I was like sitting there, and I was like, "Oh, do I even have any?" And I looked, and all I had were Halloween sprinkles, so I didn't think they would go well. They were like green, black, and purple. Okay. So let's start dipping these. All you're going to do, it's super simple. We're going to dip them, and then we'll put them right back up here. And what happens is the glaze will then drip down, the excess glaze, but it will coat the whole donut. And you want to do it while it's still warm so that they can like ooze down nicely. But look how pretty those are. And then you can even go over and drizzle like an extra color on top if you wanted, like do a secondary color. My kids are just always happy when they see anything really fun and colorful. Let me wash my hands real quick. Okay. Let's see if these next ones are ready to pop out. Yes, now we've got a golden one. So if you ever overfill it, you can just easily like pull off that extra stuff to have a more pretty one. But that's always like, it's like a waffle. When you make a waffle, if you overfill it, it sticks out. When they cool just a second, I'll pull them off so we can have more pretty looking ones. We're going to add. And I was going to say, I always spray between just because I don't want it to stick. Now, they are griddle, so they theoretically shouldn't stick, but I've had them stick before, and I prefer to be err on the safe side and just put a little bit of Pam.
You have a question? What's the best way to keep them fresh?
Keep them in an airtight container, and then I always just find like popping them in the microwave for like 5 to 6 minutes will help re-moisten them up. But what I like to do is when they're still hot, like so a little bit, not like hot, but like warm, I put them in an airtight container so that steam just stays in there with them and makes them delicious.
Although all these will be gone.
But yeah, these don't last long. Let's see. I'm gonna give these maybe one more minute to cool off. Let's get our salad prepped here. So we're gonna put a little bit of red onion in because I love red onion in salad, on sandwiches. Gotta use just red onion. You don't want to use a yellow or a white one. They're much too astringent. So we've got some red onion in here. And we're going to put some tomatoes in our salad. Here we go. Top these. Just trying to do something lighter and fresh. We were outside playing with the little ones before their nap because it's just such a nice day. You know, spring is coming and we have, I think it's like in the 60s, mid 60s, which is nice. We had kind of a chillier weekend, which is strange because last week we had mid 80s. And I'm always like, when is Tennessee going to make up their mind? I'm going to throw in some cucumbers. And then I've got a sweet pepper. So I'm just going to pull out some of the seeds here. We're going to toss it in there, and then we'll make a quick vinaigrette to toss it all with, kind of like a creamy Italian vinegar.
You had a question, is that a dressing you make from scratch?
Yes, I was just going to mix it up. It's really not hard to make your dressings from scratch. You just got to, you start with kind of an oil base. And then if you like it creamier, you can add some mayo and then just spices and a little bit of vinegar. And you'll have like a delicious vinaigrette in no time. I have a couple ones that I have are like my tried and true recipes. And then we're going to add our nice little avocado chunks. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Let me give my hands a wash. And let's get our next little donut here. So now that they're cooled off, you can just easily pull these like little bits if you overfill it away. That way you can have the nice, beautiful donuts. It's funny. My kids will look at them and they will eat all the pretty ones first before they touch one that looks slightly funny. And I'm like, they all taste the same.
You have a question? How do you know which avocado is the right avocado?
So when most of the time when you buy an avocado from the store, they are like they're not ripe yet. And so what I do is I leave them by my bananas for about a day or two until you can just barely, like, if when you push them, they have a little give. That's when I know they're ripe. So if once they get to that, you can eat them right away. If you're not ready to eat them, pop them in your fridge because your fridge will stop them from ripening up. And that's the best way I have found to make a delicious, like have delicious avocados, because they are never ripe when you're at the store. And I never even want to buy one that's ripe at the store because to me, I'm like, oh, that's going to be mushy. Okay, let me get let's make our vinaigrette here. So we've got oil. Let me grab my apple cider vinegar. This is a lifesaver when you're making your own vinaigrettes. It's a shaker and it has measurements on it. So we'll start out with about, I want to say 2 ounces of apple cider vinegar. I'm like eventually going to be down out of my vinegar. I have like 3 bottles of it. I bought it in bulk and I realized I never go through enough vinegar. And then I do double that of oil. So we're going to have, if that was 2, we're going to put oil. We're going to put 4 ounces of oil. And this is going to last us a while. I make a bunch and then I'll keep it in the fridge.
You got a question? What's the brand of shaker?
It is, I believe, an OXO. Yes, OXO. Love it. It is nice to have. Let me grab my mayo because I do like a creamy vinaigrette. Now we're gonna put in about a tablespoon. So I just squeezed it up. And then now the thing is I can keep this in the fridge as long as I don't add fresh herbs. If you add fresh herbs to it, then it goes bad sooner. And so if I make it without fresh herbs, it will last weeks. If I don't make it with fresh herbs, I have about a couple days to use it. We're going to use a little bit of onion powder, about a half a teaspoon. And then here are your Italian flavors going to come through for your Italian dressing. So you're going to use about, I want to say 1.5 teaspoons. You want a good amount. You could also, if you don't have Italian seasonings, basil and oregano would work well for it. A pinch of black pepper. Black pepper goes a long way, so maybe 1/4 teaspoon. And then garlic salt. We're going to use about 1 teaspoon because this is what's going to flavor up your leaves or your lettuce. And then all you have to do, screw the lid on. We're going to close it. So this opens and close it at the end so you can pour it so it's nice. And you just give it a good shake. And the oil and the vinegar emulsify together, which keeps them nice and thick. And look, you have this just beautiful, rich, kind of creamy Italian dressing. You could add a bit of mustard in it if you like that. I'm not a huge mustard fan, so I keep it out. Let's check what these are doing. Awesome, perfect. We're almost ready for our last batch to go in. And then we can start prepping up our salad with our chicken and our sourdough croutons. Okay, let's give this a nice spray down. We'll dip those up. Maybe this next batch will go a little crazy, do half and half in our dipping. Okay. You could also, if you had sprinkles, if you mix sprinkles into your your donut batter, what they do is they kind of melt, and so you'd have like a funfetti kind of color in there. So that would be a cute way to add a little bit of fun to the inside of your donut. There we go. And again, these are your good old-fashioned cake donuts, which I said, I'm like, I need to do my yeast donuts or try the yeast donuts or the sourdough where you actually take the time to let them rise. But these are always everyone's favorite as well. Give my hands a quick rinse. And let's dip these. And then maybe we'll add a couple drizzles to it, and then we'll finish up our salad. Look at that. Beautiful. And running out of room on here. So I think this batch, made 20 altogether. So a little shy of 2 dozen.
You have a question? Can you go over the icing?
The icing, it's super simple. It is just a teaspoon of either vanilla or almond extract, and then a little bit of half and half, and some powdered sugar. And you just make it until it's got like a kind of a thick, runny texture. So here we'll kind of do a couple little pretty swirls over it. So if you want that, have a nice little pretty pop of color, you can. So you can definitely add a little more flair to it. See if we can get a little bit of some pink on there. So, but these will just, the flavor for our donuts come in through the glaze. So you want to make sure you have a nice one because they are more of a mild vanilla cake donut. So the glaze is really where it shines. You could also just coat them in butter and then toss them in powdered sugar if you wanted some like powdered sugar donuts. But we find that, we do one little drizzle on here, and then we're going to do our salads. Look at this. So we got to have some of our pretty ones. Perfect. Okay. Let's get our salads tossed. Okay, so we have our beautiful vinaigrette. We're going to just pour some over. And then I'm going to use my tongs, and we're going to just toss everything. You always want to toss it in a nice big bowl because it is hard to coat your salad in a tiny bowl. Of course, we always have a few stragglers who like to jump out. And lovely. Now let's go get our bowls. Okay, so we're about to plate these up, and then let me get 2 eggs. We'll put an egg on each one. I want to save most of them for our Easter bread that we're making. You know, the Italian Easter bread where you dip it, like you braid the dyed eggs in it. So I'm gonna have my kids dye those up tonight. They love dyeing eggs, but we're gonna peel them off. This one luckily came off fairly well. Give it a quick rinse. Now let's plate up our salads. I'm going to cut my egg in half. That way it's ready for plating. Perfect. Look at, we got a perfect hard-boiled egg. So we're going to put our nice salads. And then we're going to coat it with our grill or our sauteed chicken. And of course, we can't forget our homemade croutons. This will add a nice, wonderful crunch to your salad and a lot of flavor because remember, we seasoned them up well. And then, of course, all salads need a hard-boiled egg. So again, today we made our homemade sourdough croutons using leftover sourdough bread. We sauteed up our chicken and some spices, made a delicious creamy Italian dressing on ours, and then we finished off. We're gonna have our wonderful donuts for dessert. We made a vanilla sourdough discard donut mix with these lovely glazes in vanilla and almond. We've got our last batch out here, nice and ready to coat. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're making for our family. We're cooking, hopefully teach you guys something along the way. And again, remember, all of our videos get uploaded to the link on our page. That is probably the quickest way to access a recipe. I do try to get recipe cards out, but that is the quickest. Again, thanks so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe.